She stood perfectly still in the meadow, eyes unfocused, lost somewhere between the grass and the sky. The morning mist clung to the edges of a clearing just outside Portland, Oregon, where wildflowers bent under the weight of dew and the air carried the scent of pine and earth. A young fawn, no more than 8 weeks old, remained motionless among the tall stems, her spotted coat blending with the dappled light. But she wasn't hiding from danger. She was simply elsewhere, caught in a trance that pulled her away from the present moment. Her mother grazed nearby, lifting her head occasionally to check on her, but the fawn didn't notice. She stared at nothing, breathing softly, her legs locked in place as if the world around her had faded into background noise. It wasn't the first time. Every day, multiple times, she would freeze mid-step, her gaze drifting somewhere unreachable, her body present but her mind wandering through invisible doorways no one else could see. Other fawns played in the clearing, testing their speed, learning to leap, building the instincts they would need to survive. But she remained apart, detached, slipping into her own quiet world where movement felt unnecessary and time stretched into something soft and endless. Her mother nudged her gently with her nose, trying to pull her back. The fawn blinked slowly, returning to the moment with a delayed awareness that made her stumble slightly before finding her footing. She looked around as if surprised to find herself standing in the meadow, surrounded by the sounds and movements she had somehow missed. Then, just as quickly, her eyes glazed over again, and she drifted away once more. It was a pattern that worried her mother, though instinct offered no answers. The fawn wasn't injured, wasn't sick in any visible way, but something held her at a distance from the world, something that made her hesitate when she should run, freeze when she should follow, and drift when she needed to stay alert. In the wild, hesitation meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant danger. A sharp crack echoed through the trees one afternoon, sudden and jarring. The herd scattered instantly, bounding through the underbrush with practiced urgency. The fawn's mother called out, a short, urgent bleat meant to signal her daughter to follow. But the fawn stood frozen, eyes wide but unseeing, locked in that familiar faraway stare. She didn't register the sound, didn't feel the vibration of hooves pounding the earth around her. She simply remained, a small statue in the clearing, as the world moved without her. By the time she blinked back into awareness, the meadow was empty. The silence pressed against her like a weight she couldn't name. She turned in a slow circle, searching for the familiar shapes of her mother, her herd, the safety she had always known. But there was nothing. Only the rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds she couldn't interpret. Panic should have set in, but instead, she felt only a dull confusion, as if waking from a dream she couldn't quite remember. She took a few tentative steps forward, then stopped, unsure which direction to move. Her instincts, dulled by her constant drifting, offered no guidance. She lowered her head, breathing unsteadily, and for the first time in her short life, she felt the full weight of being truly alone. That's when she noticed the eyes. Amber and bright, watching her from the edge of the tree line. A fox stepped into the clearing with quiet, deliberate movements, her russet coat catching the filtered sunlight. She was small, lean, with a face that carried both sharpness and something softer, something patient. The fawn froze again, but this time it wasn't from distraction. It was instinct, the kind that told her predators were dangerous, that she should run. But her legs wouldn't move. The fox approached slowly, stopping a few paces away. She didn't crouch, didn't bare her teeth, didn't show any sign of aggression. Instead, she sat down, curling her tail around her paws, and simply watched. The fawn's breathing slowed. The fox tilted her head, studying the young deer with an expression that seemed almost curious, almost knowing. Then, without warning, the fox stood and turned, walking back toward the trees. She paused at the edge of the clearing, glancing over her shoulder as if waiting. The fawn didn't understand, but something in the fox's gaze pulled at her, a quiet invitation she couldn't ignore. She took a step forward, then another, following the small figure into the shadows. The fox moved with purpose, weaving through the underbrush with a grace that seemed effortless. The fawn struggled to keep up, her legs clumsy, her focus wavering. But every time she started to drift, the fox would stop and wait, amber eyes fixed on her until she returned to the moment. It was a strange, silent dance, one that carried them deeper into the forest. By the time the sun began to set, the fox led the fawn to a small hollow beneath a fallen log, sheltered and hidden from the wind. The fawn sank into the soft earth, exhausted, her body trembling from the effort of staying present for so long. The fox settled nearby, close enough to offer warmth but far enough to respect the space between them. As the fawn's eyes began to close, she felt something unfamiliar settle over her. Not fear, not confusion, but a strange, fragile sense of safety. The fox remained awake, watching the darkness with quiet vigilance, and for the first time since being separated from her mother, the fawn allowed herself to sleep deeply. The days that followed fell into a rhythm the fawn had never known. Each morning, the fox would rise first, stretching her lean body before moving through the forest with quiet purpose. The fawn would follow, stumbling at first, her mind still prone to wandering. But the fox never rushed her. She would pause whenever the fawn's gaze drifted, waiting patiently until the young deer returned to the present. Then they would continue, step by step, through the shifting landscape. The fox taught her without words. When they approached a stream, the fox would stop at the water's edge, demonstrating how to test the current with a paw before crossing. The fawn watched, her attention flickering, but the fox repeated the motion until the lesson settled in. When they moved through dense brush, the fox showed her how to navigate the thorns, how to move with intention rather than panic. Every lesson was delivered with the same quiet patience, the same steady presence that refused to let the fawn disappear into her daydreams. What surprised the fawn most was how the fox seemed to understand her lapses. When her eyes glazed over and her body froze, the fox didn't abandon her or grow frustrated. Instead, she would circle back, positioning herself directly in the fawn's line of sight, her amber eyes sharp and grounding. The fawn would blink, pulled back by the intensity of that gaze, and the fox would nod slightly, as if acknowledging her return. It was a language without sound, a communication built on presence and patience. Slowly, the fawn began to change. Her moments of drifting grew shorter, her awareness sharper. She started noticing the small details the fox paid attention to, the rustle of leaves that signaled movement, the scent carried on the wind, the way shadows shifted as the sun moved across the sky. Her legs grew stronger, her steps more confident. She no longer stumbled when the fox led her through difficult terrain. She began to anticipate the lessons, watching the fox's movements with a focus she had never managed before. One afternoon, they came across a small clearing where a rabbit grazed, unaware of their presence. The fox crouched low, her body tense with controlled energy. The fawn watched, mesmerized, as the fox moved forward with silent precision, each step calculated, each breath measured. The rabbit bolted at the last moment, disappearing into the underbrush, but the fox didn't chase. She turned back to the fawn, her expression calm, as if the lesson had been about the approach, not the capture. The fawn understood. It wasn't about hunting. It was about being present, about staying focused, about moving through the world with intention rather than distraction. That night, as they rested beneath the stars, the fawn felt something shift inside her. The constant pull toward daydreaming, the fog that had always clouded her mind, began to thin. She looked at the fox, curled beside her with eyes half closed, and felt a gratitude she couldn't express. This mysterious creature had become her guide, her anchor, the steady presence that kept her tethered to the world. But as the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the forest, a question settled in the fawn's chest. Why? Why had the fox stayed? Why had she chosen to lead a lost, distracted fawn through the wilderness when survival meant focusing on one's own needs? The answer would come, but not yet. For now, the fawn simply rested, her breathing synchronized with the fox's, two unlikely companions finding rhythm in the quiet night. The turning point came on a morning when the air felt different, charged with a tension the fawn couldn't name. The fox moved through the forest with unusual alertness, her ears swiveling, her nose testing every shift in the wind. The fawn followed closely, her own senses heightened by the fox's behavior. Then she heard it, a distant sound that made her blood run cold. The baying of hounds, carried on the breeze like a warning. The fox stopped abruptly, her body going rigid. She turned to the fawn, her amber eyes intense, urgent. For a moment, the fawn felt the familiar pull, the desire to drift away from the fear rising in her chest. But the fox stepped closer, pressing her nose against the fawn's shoulder, grounding her with the physical touch. The fawn blinked, forcing herself to stay present, to feel the earth beneath her hooves, to acknowledge the danger approaching. The fox began to move, not running but walking with deliberate speed. The fawn followed, her heart pounding, her mind fighting to stay focused. The sounds grew louder, closer, the hounds picking up a scent trail that led directly toward them. The fox veered sharply, leading the fawn toward a rocky outcropping where the terrain grew steep and difficult. The fawn's legs trembled as they climbed, her hooves slipping on loose stones. Behind them, the baying intensified, joined now by human voices calling commands. The fawn's vision started to blur, the edges of her awareness softening as fear threatened to pull her into the familiar fog. But the fox was there, always just ahead, glancing back with eyes that demanded she stay present, stay aware, stay alive. They reached a narrow crevice between two large boulders. The fox slipped through easily, then turned, waiting. The fawn hesitated, her body too large for the space, but the fox's gaze held her steady. She pushed forward, squeezing through the tight opening, feeling the rough stones scrape against her sides. On the other side, the fox led her into a small cave, hidden and dark. They pressed against the back wall, breathing hard, listening as the sounds of pursuit grew deafening. The hounds passed directly by the entrance, their voices echoing off the rocks. The fawn's entire body shook, but she didn't drift. She stayed anchored in the moment, feeling the fox's warmth beside her, focusing on each breath, each heartbeat, each second that passed. The sounds eventually faded, moving deeper into the forest, away from their hiding place. The fawn released a shaky breath, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. The fox remained still, listening, waiting until she was certain the danger had passed. Then she turned to the fawn, and something in her expression had changed. It was softer now, almost proud. The fawn had stayed present through the entire ordeal. She had faced her fear without disappearing into herself. She had survived not by freezing or fleeing blindly, but by staying focused, by trusting the guidance offered to her. As they emerged from the cave into the late afternoon light, the fawn felt different. Stronger. More aware of her own capability. The fox led her to a quiet stream where they drank deeply, the cool water washing away the dust and fear. When they settled for the night, the fawn noticed something she had never seen before. The fox's left hind leg bore an old scar, a mark that suggested injury, perhaps from a trap or a predator. The fox had been moving carefully all along, compensating for a weakness the fawn had never noticed. The realization struck her with unexpected force. The fox had been guiding her despite her own vulnerability, teaching her to be present and aware even while carrying her own burden. The fawn understood then why the fox had stayed. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. The fox had seen in the fawn something familiar, a struggle to navigate a world that demanded constant awareness, constant presence. And she had chosen to help, to offer the guidance she perhaps had wished for herself. That night, the fawn didn't drift. She stayed awake, watching the fox sleep, feeling the weight of gratitude and understanding settle into her bones. The lessons had been about more than survival. They had been about learning to live fully in each moment, to face the world without retreating into distraction or fear. The fawn had found her guide, and in doing so, she had found herself. The morning came with unexpected warmth, sunlight streaming through the canopy in golden shafts that painted the forest floor. The fawn woke to find the fox already standing, gazing toward the east where the trees thinned and the meadow opened up. There was something final in her posture, something that made the fawn's heart tighten. The fox turned and began walking, not with the teaching pace she had maintained for weeks, but with a purposeful stride that suggested destination rather than lesson. The fawn followed, her steps sure now, her awareness sharp. They moved through familiar territory, retracing paths they had walked together, passing the stream where the fawn had learned to cross, the clearing where she had learned to stay alert, the hollow where they had first rested together. Each place carried memory, each step felt like both greeting and farewell. As they approached the edge of the meadow where the fawn had first been found, she saw them. Her herd, grazing peacefully in the morning light, her mother among them, head lifting occasionally to scan the surroundings. The fawn's breath caught. The fox stopped at the tree line, turning to face her one last time. Their eyes met, and in that gaze passed everything that couldn't be spoken. Gratitude, understanding, the acknowledgement of transformation. The fox had led her here, back to where she belonged, but the fawn who stood at the edge of the meadow was not the same one who had been lost. She was present now, aware, capable of navigating the world without disappearing into herself. The fox took a step back, then another, her amber eyes holding the fawn's until the last possible moment. Then she turned and vanished into the forest, a flash of russet against green, gone as mysteriously as she had appeared. The fawn stood alone at the boundary between forest and meadow, between who she had been and who she had become. She took a deep breath, feeling the earth solid beneath her hooves, the sun warm on her coat, the present moment alive and real around her. Then she stepped forward into the clearing. Her mother's head lifted immediately, recognition and relief flooding her dark eyes. The fawn walked toward her, steady and sure, no longer drifting, no longer lost. When they touched noses, the fawn felt the circle complete, the journey ending where it began but carrying her forward into something new. She had learned that presence was a choice, that awareness was a practice, that staying grounded in the moment was both the hardest and most essential skill for survival. And she had learned it from a guide who understood that sometimes the lost need not answers, but simply someone willing to walk beside them until they find their own way. The mysterious fox had given her that gift, and the daydreaming fawn who never dared had become a young deer who finally could.